Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. I'm Mrs. Emerentia Botha, and I'll be presenting on main clauses and dependent clauses. Right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to see what is a clause. So let's just revise that before we continue. So a clause is a group of words that includes a subject and a verb. An example, the grey squirrel darted up the tree. That is then what a clause is. Now we are going to look at main or independent clauses. So a clause can stand alone as a complete sentence because it expresses a complete thought. So this is now a main or an independent clause. And you can think of it as when you're a grown-up and you earn your own money, you are independent, you can stand on your own and you can provide for yourself. You do not need someone else to look after you. It's the same with this clause. It can stand on its own. It's a complete thought. You understand it when you read this clause. So the features of this clause, it has a subject, so who or what the sentence is about, and then a predicate. Now, predicate is then the verb and the rest of the sentence stating something about the subject. Okay, if we look at this example of the main or the independent clause, Mpo loves reading. We can see this sentence. You understand it. You see the picture there as well. You understand that she loves reading. You do not need any more information on this. So in this sentence, Mpo will be the subject and loves reading will be the predicate. So we understand the sentence on its own. Another example, the boys played soccer. We understand just by reading it because the boys is the subject and played soccer will be the predicate. We look at this example. The children listened to the teacher. Again, we do not need to add any information because we can understand this. It is a main or an independent clause. The children, subject, then listened to the teacher is the predicate. So this is then the definition of a main or an independent clause. It can stand on its own. You understand it just as it is. Now we're going to look at the dependent clause. So this is, we can look at it as well as maybe like a child, that does not earn their own money yet. So in other words, they are still dependent on the grown-ups to give them their food and so on. So a dependent clause depends on the main clause. It cannot function on its own. It can't stand alone because it does not express a complete thought. You cannot understand it if you only read a dependent clause. And it is often introduced by a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. We give examples of that. Because she loves reading. So what happened? You are thinking now, because she loves reading, you can hear, you need more information. This cannot stand on its own. You cannot have a conversation like this because you don't understand what is being said. So how will it make sense? We combine the dependent clause with an independent clause. The example, Mpo is very clever because she loves reading. Now the dependent clause makes sense. So we can see that Mpo is very clever. That will be our independent clause. We combine it with our dependent clause, which is then because she loves reading. Let's look at another example. Although it was raining. Again, you can hear that there must be something added. So what happened? Although it was raining, how will this dependent clause make sense? Let us combine again the dependent clause with an independent clause. The example here, although it was raining, the boys played soccer. So now it makes sense. Our dependent clause, although it was raining, cannot stand on its own. It doesn't make sense. It's not a complete thought. But if we combine it with the independent clause, then we can see that it makes sense. Although it was raining, the boys played soccer. If we look at this example, even though they are tired. And again, what about it? What happened? Even though they are tired, then what? It's an incomplete thought. So how will this one make sense? Again, we combine the dependent clause with an independent clause. An example, the children listen to the teacher, even though they are tired. So here we see again, the one that makes sense, now we add information to it, even though they are tired. So our dependent clause makes sense when it's combined with an independent clause. Now let's look at this. This is then how you can look whether it's dependent or independent. So from what you've learned, if you look at this first sentence, we did our homework. So we can understand this because there's no more information needed. You can add, but it's not necessary because you can understand the sentence as it is. And thus it is an independent sentence or clause. Since you've been gone, what happened? So now do you see this is an incomplete thought? We are not entirely sure. So now if we have to identify which type of clause this is, we will say it is a dependent clause. When the mailman arrived, not enough information. What happened when the mailman arrived? Did he deliver the mail? Did the dog chase him? What happened? We need more information. So now if we have to identify which clause this is, we will say it is a dependent clause. Then she went to the park. Now we read it and we think about it. She went to the park. That's enough information to understand the sentence as a whole. There's a subject and there's a predicate. So you can understand that the sentence can stand on its own. So when you identify it, you will say that this is an independent clause. So let's just look at this. Clauses, the part of sentence that tells you something. So the first, if we look here, the independent clause or the main clause. The definition, it can stand on its own. It has a subject, a verb, and an object. It's a simple sentence. You can understand it. Here you can also see we can use conjunctions with this if we combine two simple sentences together. There's the example. The little boy played in the park and he fell in the sand. So do you see both of them? If you just said the little boy played in the park, that is an independent clause. He fell in the sand is also an independent clause. And we can combine them to give more information with the conjunction and. Now a dependent clause, it gives us extra information. But this, a dependent clause cannot stand on its own. It has a subject and a verb. And then it adds to the verb or noun in the sentence. With this one, we use subordinating conjunctions. An example, the little boy who played in the park fell in the sand. So that added information, who played in the park. If we just take that out and we leave out the rest of the information and we say, who played in the park? It's not a question, it's a statement. Then it won't make sense because we need more information. Thus, we know that that will be the dependent clause. And with this added information, it combines the independent and the dependent clause. So just again, that quick tip, if we look at if a clause makes sense as a full sentence, so you can understand it, it can stand on its own, then it is a main or an independent clause. If it leaves you asking, what happened? So you need more information. You don't know what the rest of the information is. then you know it is dependent. And remember, for a dependent sentence to make sense, we combine it with an independent clause. So when they ask you to identify whether it is an independent or a dependent clause, then you always look at it like this. You always check if the sentence on its own makes sense. Does it have a subject and a predicate? Then you know it is an independent clause. But if you don't have any information, you can't understand it, it does not stand on its own, then you know it is a dependent clause. So that one then depends on the independent clause for it to make sense, to give us the whole picture of the sentence. Okay, and that is then our lesson for today. I hope that you understand the dependent and independent clauses a bit better now. And until next time, I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you very much for listening.